you. First of all, what was your upbringing with money? Like, how did you observe it in your youth? And how did that observation affect your adult handling of money?
Um, Growing up, my concept or my understanding of money was very like surface level. Like, I think I didn't grow up in a household where money was just limitless and, you know,
Yeah, that's
you
most.
just, my parents were very, like, hardcore middle class. But there were a lot of things that they kept from my sister and me, growing up. You know, my mom, now as an adult, she's, you know, more transparent with us, and now that we have both have household, like, husbands and families of our own, like, she's more, both of my parents are more transparent, about like how things were actually behind the curtain. Like, you know, she told me that a lot, like, there were times when my parents, they had to scrape pennies together to get us, you know, certain things or whatever, and it was just totally unbeknownst to us.
Yeah.
Of what they were actually dealing with behind closed doors. You know, because they were just trying to do the best that they could and provide, you know, a certain life for their children. And we had a good life. But I think that there were, you know, there were some, I don't want to say downsides, but I guess for lack of better words, downsides to not having that full transparency or that full picture
At that time.
at that time. Um, because, you know, my parents, they were very young when they got married, and they were younger. They were in their early to mid 20s when they started having kids. They were high school sweethearts. They got married fresh out of college. Um, so
All the prototypical things.
yeah, and they grew up in a generation where the credit card was like the new thing. Like, they got, you know, they had credit card companies on college campuses, like, selling the credit card. So they basically were like definitely spending beyond their means and not like managing money from a perspective of, like, you know, knowing how to budget and stuff like that. I mean, they learned, but they were learning as they went along. So for me, I, you know, growing up, I just didn't really have that concept of like budgeting, and, you know, that wasn't like a practice in our home, you know, in my house growing up, in my family growing up. So I took those things into adulthood. Yes, I knew, like, okay, it's good to budget and save on the surface, but I didn't have a practical sense of how to do that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So the idea of it, you know, like, hey, this could be helpful, but how do I actually execute on it?
Yeah, I remember, you know, when I was fresh out of college and getting my paychecks, and I was living at home with my parents, you know, after, well, I was sick when I first graduated, but after I recovered and got into the workforce, I was at home with my parents, and I was getting paychecks, and they were like, "Oh, you can stay home and save up," and all of that sounded good. Like, I had the idea and the intention to save, but I just didn't have those like practical systems. Yeah. And yeah, so.
Yeah. I feel like what you're describing is for most people something that they can relate to, and that like they know all of these things: budgeting, saving, paying off debt, all of that stuff are good in theory.
Yeah.
But how do you actually take those theories and make them real and practical? Yeah. That's the carryover that sometimes is missing. And even from the standpoint of your parents, them being hardworking, middle class, making money, but not necessarily like knowing for themselves how to do a lot of these things. But even not only that, but teaching it to your children is the next thing, so that they can grow up knowing how to do the thing as well.
Yeah.
So even in adulthood now, like knowing that that was the case in your childhood, how do you think that has affected you today?
Like not doing the things in childhood.
Yeah, not knowing those things back then, has it had a big impact, small impact? Like, how
Oh,
do you?
absolutely a big impact. I would say just kind of going off of what we were just talking about, like not having more of that theoretical and not that practical sense. Like when I was living with my parents, and they were like, "Oh, you can save up," but I still had student loans, and in the 7 years that I lived at home with my parents, there's no reason why I shouldn't have been able to pay off my student loans. Now I did. Now I mentioned I got sick. I struck ill with. I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition out of college called dermatomyositis. Um, and so I was in and out of. I was going to see specialists and in and out of the doctor, hospital, had medical procedures done. So I was knee deep in like medical bills and stuff. So I did pay off all my medical bills. I'll say that. But I was still there long enough to put a nice dent, yeah, at the very least in my student loans. Yeah. And if I knew then what I know now, I would have definitely been like very proactive at like paying off my student loans and building a nice little nest egg, because by the time that I did move out, I was starting to learn those things, and because
I blessed you.
The Lord blessed me. He knew I needed a financial advisor as a husband. So Rob and I had just started dating when the year prior to me like finally moving out. And I had aggressively saved at that point to purchase my condo. But if I had that knowledge all throughout, I would have been much further ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not like a detrimental thing that, people don't have that insight at a young age. However, it does give them the opportunity to expedite all of the things, yeah, that they're going to do anyway. So I think that's something that is very common from household to household. The fact that like parents don't know the financial education and don't implement those things for themselves, and they don't feel comfortable teaching it, which in turn kind of affects the child. My, mm-hmm, perspective from growing up and how I saw money was I saw two sides really. Like my dad was very involved with his money, like business was something that he was always into. He would be taking me around to like field vending machines at different places that he had vending machines at. I saw him work a lot and like be very successful at it. He was telling me that he was basically investing his whole W-2 paycheck and all of his business ventures. Like I saw a lot of that. And he was telling me how he was investing and putting money away in the 401k. So I was inspired by that, and I always kind of knew that I was a saver because of having that perspective. So for him, I remember even in college, he had opened up like a CD. Didn't know what it was called at the time, but a certificate deposit that you can earn a little bit of interest on. And that was like my first investment. So that was pretty cool. He called me and said, like, I think I put, I don't know, it's like $1,000 or something. And I earned a little bit of interest on it. It wasn't a ton of money, but it was still something to know that, like, you can put money in places in which it actually grows more than what you get at the bank. So that was one side. And then the other side, for like my mom's side, that was a little bit different, and I think that aspect of it is more in line with what you were saying, where it wasn't really talked about. I could see like indications of like, oh, we just ain't got it because we ain't been out in a while, or like, oh, she must have ran into some money because we going out a lot now. Mm-hmm. It was a lot of that. Like I could just see transactionally how things were really going, but it wasn't a conversation, yeah, in which we dig in and say, oh, like this is the budget, this is this and that.
And I think your parents were separate.
Yeah.
Like separated.
Yeah. So that's a good point. I was in two different households.
Yeah.
Kind of like how Rich Dad Poor Dad is, saying that those two perspectives help me to shape how I kind of think about money and things like that as well. So I was appreciative for those and how it has shaped me and how I deal with money now. Uh, Having those two perspectives, I can see like I am a saver. I like saving money. I'm not a super spender, which my dad didn't really spend like that either, but he did have a thing for cars. He always loved having like a hot rod or something like that. Um, yeah, I think a lot of my childhood actually characterized like investing. I invest and put into the 401k and IRAs. I've been doing that since I got out of school. So that just shaped how I think about it. And I saw it as something that could be used as a resource to really build your life. Not so much something that you just use on a day to day. So those were definitely things that I took that are positive examples, I think. But what opportunities came, like I think just financial education is going to be the main opportunity to have these conversations with your child. Make sure that they are introduced to it because our school systems and all of the things that they're learning, financial education isn't like a top tier thing that they're pushing. I don't know why.
I do.
Well, go ahead.
I mean, no, don't get me. I'm a low key conspiracy theorist, so don't get me to going. But no, I mean,
but I think that's a legitimate obvious question, though. Like, why isn't this something we've seen it?
Because if it were actually taught, if there's nothing really practical that they're actually teaching, like the stuff that I learned in high school and college is like outside of what I love to do, which is write, like English and literature and stuff like that. Like there isn't really anything like algebra and calculus and all of those things. Yeah. I don't, I mean, I'm sure they show up in some type of like subconscious way.
You could put it in ChatGPT now.
But yeah, but I don't like, I'm not like actively like doing this in my practical life, everyday life. So I think it's set up that way, designed that way for people to not know, if they taught it directly in school. Can you imagine how many more people would be like finance? They literally, it's like creating the illness to treat the symptoms type things. It's like you're creating the drug for people to get, like, because people want to. It's almost like it's a system designed to keep people reliant on like the government and stuff like that, credit, and all that.
Well, that's why, or one of the reasons that we exist is to be able to give that type of insight, give that type of education, because what we're finding is like what I love about my business is I get to work with people like us. So we're young, we're a growing family, we're starting and growing in our careers, starting businesses, and there are a lot of financial decisions that come from all of those things. But again, like you said earlier, we have the planner in the house that is used to going through it, whereas another household, you got two business owners, they don't necessarily have the time to really sit down and kind of go through these things. So what I love is that it's a collaboration. Like I'm not just here to like tell you, hey, like do this, do this, do this, and do this. Like I always give the analogy of like you're the quarterback, I'm the coach. The quarterback got to get on the field. He has to run the play. He has to execute. But the coach actually gives him the tools, the resources, the time, the energy to like make sure that his toolbox is full and that he knows how to use it well against any defense. Right. So if that's the case, my firm partners with individuals, growing families, things like that, to be able to feel confident in that way in which you do have the information and you do feel confident and you don't feel anxious about how you're dealing with your money.
I have one more question.
Oh.
Yeah. With us having talked about how we were impacted from our upbringing and how we know about finances, how would you implement teaching our children about finances?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think you can begin like really early. Like he's 2 months right now, so obviously it's gonna take a little time for him to. He's about to rank up. Yeah, so as soon as he's able to have these sort of conversations, I would begin introducing it in a very like elementary way, of course. So just making it fun. I mean, counting candy or something like that can be significant at this age because he's literally eating everything up. So I think focusing on the concepts at a young age, and you can really build on the concepts to like get to tangible money and dollars and cents when they get to the age to where they want to buy their own candy or whatever it is. Slowing down to talk about like the definitions of things. What is an asset? What is a liability? Why do you want to own assets and not liabilities? How does that affect you? What is your net worth? Like all of these kind of financial terms that are thrown around just because they're jargon type words. Like, what does that actually mean? How does that actually correlate to your life? And by just kind of drilling that from one or whatever it may be, I think they start to think that way. This is like shaping or molding their mind to be more using money as a resource rather than just like something that is a means to an end. So that's what I would say. Just taking the time to have the conversations and invite them into so that if we do have something, he comes to us and says, I want to do this or I want to buy this, and we don't necessarily want to do it. It's not just no. Like, and sometimes maybe it is just no, but other times it's like, okay, well, here's where we are. Here are what mommy and daddy got going on. If you want to make it happen, let's talk about it. How do you maybe he's able to contribute in some way by selling lemonade or whatever. Like how do you involve him to like think analytically and try and solve problems for himself at a young age?
I think that was where more what my answer was going to be, like getting him being transparent about. I mean, of course, you don't tell them, oh, this is how much mommy's made. Well, right. I mean, I don't know what that looks like, but just having more of that transparency. Having more of that transparency about where we are, like you said, and how our household, how we operate financially, our household, and how things run, like, bills and, stuff like that. Playing Monopoly, getting him more in the mindset of how like just the world works and life works in general. Thinking, critical thinking, all those things, and also like having ways like when he's old enough to get an allowance, like helping him put together a budget. I saw this cool thing on social media where the parent like gives, it was like a little girl like $5 for allowance, and it's like, okay, $1 you put away for this, and then you have, I don't know, I think she may have been teaching her how to tithe, so like 10% here, and right. Then so I think doing that on that scale where they can, it's digestible for them, and you make it practical and fun and engaging. I think that's how I would want to teach our kids.
Yeah, it's better to start early. I would say that for sure. And if they have these skills, even if they enter the job market, if they want to own their own business, like it's just going to be beneficial. Money touches every aspect of everything that we do. So having the conversations early rather than kind of putting them on the shelf is going to be beneficial. And he'll definitely see the fruit of that. Again, just in the family, money is a big part that brings a lot of families apart. We want to see those families come together and engage in a lot of these conversations that can help to produce that. So, want to hear you guys' thoughts. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe if you find this helpful, and send it over to somebody if you think it would benefit them as well. Until next time, see you guys soon.